can grow from seed here as plants. So why are you people here? Why do you want to grow stuff from seed? Say what? Save money. Yes, it's a little more economical to do it that way. Plants. It's fun to see them grow. You should still be amazed. No matter how old you are, you should still be amazed that something this small can grow into something, and you did it. Yeah, so it doesn't always happen that way, right? What's another reason?
We just purchased a greenhouse.
What's that?
We just purchased a greenhouse.
Oh, you purchased a greenhouse. So obviously, yeah, you want to grow some of your own stuff that way, so it makes it easier. What's the magic word that everybody likes to say? Organic? What does that mean? Yeah. When you grow your own stuff, we go to the store to buy vegetables. The organic section over here, they charge you more for it. And why do they charge you more? So they tell you it's not full of pesticides, insecticides, those kind of things. If you grow stuff from seed yourself, you are damn sure of what is on that plant or not on that plant. So that way you grow your own organic crops that way. Yeah, and just the thrill of doing this. When you go out and look at your garden later on in the season, and you can go out there and say, "Oh, look, I grew those. Yeah, I grew that from seed." You can impress your neighbors. You have like a 6-foot tall tomato plants or whatever, like bean plants or something growing up. Oh yeah, I grew those from seed. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's a good way to. So thanks to everybody for coming out on such a cold day. It's a perfect time to do some indoor projects like starting things from seed. So this is a great day to get going. So we should start off by saying, where are we going to get our seeds? We sell a lot of seeds here at the store. There's a lot of them available online as well. Lots of information on these seed packets. Tells you when to start them, how deep to plant them, all that kind of thing. So each seed packet has a lot of info on it. You can also save seeds, from last year. A lot of people, if they're economical, they can keep, tomatoes, their prized tomatoes from last year, and save the seed and grow plants from those same seeds this year. So that's another way of doing it. Sometimes you can check for some seed viability first. Sometimes certain seeds will last quite a long time. They can last years and years and years and still germinate. Other ones are not quite as long, have the same longevity. Depends how you store them as well. So you can do a little test real quick to see if your seeds are viable. So if you have a bunch of seeds you may have collected from last year, you can always just put them in a cup of water. And the ones that float are not going to be likely to germinate. The ones that sink are ones that are more likely to germinate. You can also do a little test, like a little piece of, like a wet, moist paper towel, and put a few seeds on there and just fold it over. Put them in a nice warm location. Wait a few days and just see if they sprout just a tiny bit. Then your seeds are viable as well. So it's a good way to kind of test in your seeds to see if they're ready to go. Yeah, and lots of them are available online as well. And we still have a nice selection here in the store: annuals, perennials, vegetables, all different things. There are organic seeds in the world. I assume those are plants. There are seeds that come from their plants that were grown organically from years past. I always have a hard time believing that you can transfer any type of fungicide or insecticide that was a plant in the previous season to the next generation. So I think that's more of a marketing ploy to get you to pay a little more for some seeds. Any seeds are fine to germinate and grow, and it depends how you grow them from this point on as to whether they're organic or not. So yeah, different trends from seeds. Obviously you can do your own vegetables and herbs. You can mix up different plants. You can grow your own perennials and grasses. It takes a little longer sometimes to do from seed, but things you can start as well. A lot more economical than by purchasing the plants already. First of all, we have to determine what we're going to grow. So sometimes certain seeds are better to grow to start indoors, and some of them are not. Some things are really simple to grow. They grow super fast. Like these are one of the examples I have here. These are beans. So this one I started like 2 weeks ago. So you pop it in the soil, and we have some heated benches over here. They grow super fast. You don't have to start these indoors. This is super simple to grow outside. You just have to wait until the soil's warm enough, and you just poke the seeds in the soil, and these grow very easily, quickly outdoors. Just a regular green bean. Green bean, yeah. There's other plants that are more tropical plants. So we're talking about vegetables, like say tomatoes and peppers and such. They're tropical plants. They like to. Our growing season isn't quite long enough for them to start from seed outdoors, so that's something you want to start indoors. Take a little head start. So other things like some flowers as well, like some of the nasturtiums and sunflowers, those kind of things, super easy to grow from seed outdoors. Don't have to start them indoors. Again, the seed packets will tell you a lot of times in the back here. They'll give you all different types of information. They'll give you a date when to start them so many weeks before last frost date. I assume most of you live around here, so we know what's our last frost date. May 15th, May 20th. We usually say May 20th just to be sure. This year, the last full moon is on May 15th. So that should be our last, hopefully, cold spell. I've worn a winter coat here every single year I've worked here in May. So I know people like to jump the gun a lot of times and put stuff out a little earlier. It's not worth it a lot of times. These tropical plants, they just need to have the right soil temperature, the right air temperatures at night to grow. So we want to trick nature a little bit by starting some stuff inside from seed, but not too early. I always have people come in, like now, and they'll say, "Oh, I started my tomato seeds the end of January, and they're ready this fall." I'm like, okay, no, you can't do that. That's way too early. So I understand everybody wants to get nice big plants and jump the gun and start early, but you have to just kind of hold off just a little bit and just make sure we get just the right timing on it. So a lot of these packets will say something like 8 to 10 weeks before last frost dates, 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, that kind of thing, a little time range. So we're thinking we're coming up on mid-March, so that's 8 weeks. We're 8 weeks before May 15th. So if you got some, something like, usually like peppers and such are a good time, or a good thing to start like now. They need a little extra time to get going. So if you want to start some peppers from seed, start now. Tomatoes, a lot of other flowers and stuff. I usually wait a little bit. I wait till like the end of March, early April to get those started. Those are more like a 4 to 6 week kind of thing. So there's other ones that they grow fairly quick that only need about 2 to 4 weeks. So you're going to wait even longer on those guys. Some of the stuff like cucumbers and squash and that, if you want to grow those from seed, those don't take a whole lot of time at all to germinate and grow. So those you do a lot closer. Those you're going to start like 2 to 4 weeks before kind of thing. So like as an example, so now we just started our seeds for the cool season vegetables at this point. So that's like your broccoli, lettuce, cabbages, those kind of things. We just started those seeds indoors now. Those things are a little different. Those things can go out a little sooner. They don't have to wait until May 15th. So those things you can plant outside sometimes the end of April, early May. So that's the way we count back a little bit from a different date for those guys. So the other things like we sowed our first crop of peppers, and I think we just started first crop of tomatoes as well. We just started something out there. So again, at home you want to wait just a little bit just before you start your stuff to make sure you get the right timing on it. So this gives you just a couple of examples of different vegetables and annuals you can do from seed that are simple to do. And some perennials as well. Some perennials need a little bit of extra care. So a lot of perennials, like some of these things like you find in the stores, like columbines and stuff like that, they don't need to be stratified. What that means is they don't need like a cold period. So you can start these from seed this year, and you may or may not even get some flowers this year from them right away. A lot of perennials don't flower until the second season. So you just get a nice plant this year, and then actually the flowering will occur the next season. And some plants need to be stratified. So if you have if you're going to collect some seed from your plants from the previous season, you have to make sure they go through the cold period like they would in nature. So like some of like the Rebecca's and coneflowers and stuff like that. If you want to have those seeds chilled a little bit, you can either do it yourself at home, like put them out in the garage or something like that for a while, or just let them be out in nature, out of the plant itself, and collect the seed in the spring. So it's just a different thing you have to do for perennials. So this gives you a nice couple examples of scheduling here. But again, most of all the seed packets will have all this information on here. It'll give you some info on time to germinate, temperature, that kind of thing. And we'll talk about light and dark and that kind of thing in just a little bit. So let's get started. We're going to show you just how to do some seed starting. So we sell a couple different types of potting soil here. Seeds will germinate in any type of potting soil. Potting soil is just a nice, light, fluffy media. It's not garden soil. Garden soil is, like heavier clay-based. These are nice and light and fluffy mixes. So this is just an example here. So this is like a regular potting mix that we use in a lot of our baskets, hanging baskets, or 4.5-inch pots, smaller pots. Nice fluffy mix here, a little bit of bark in it. This is our seed starting mix over here. So it's a lot lighter and fluffier, just a lot more perlite in it. Gives you a nice, give you the seed a nice head start to grow as a plant. So I'm going to just pass this around. You guys can touch it just to see what it feels like. So again, you can start in either one. We have that's the special seed starting mix, and we have the regular potting mix. So when we start our vegetables, like we started in the house over here, we'll start them in a tray like this. It has different, like 48 holes in it like this. Now, most of you may or may not have a greenhouse. If you do have a greenhouse, or lucky to have one, we sell trays that have holes in them like this, that it will drain right through. And if you don't mind getting your floor wet, you can use something like this. Most of us don't have that. So I do at home. I usually put them in a tray like this that doesn't have holes in it, so it's going to collect any moisture that's underneath it. We do. We sell all this stuff inside. Yeah. So we have them in holes like this. So let's say if I was going to start them in something like this, I'm probably going to keep them in a tray like this for quite some time, because these are larger openings, and I can get whatever number of plants I want in this situation. So I would just use our potting mix that we use for most of our plants, like this. Yeah, I just usually keep the tray on like this. Just keep it underneath like this, yeah. You can also do something different. So this is what I use a lot of times at home too. It's a little bit bigger cell like this. It has bigger openings. What happens is a lot of times is not all your seeds will germinate. Sometimes, or you only want a certain number of plants. Maybe you don't need all these plants. So what you're going to do is use this and use our seed starting mix in this situation. And you can mark off whatever different plants you're going to grow in here. And you're going to see what germinates in this situation, and you're going to transplant it into something like this once they've germinated. So you can do it either way. You can use either soil. The seed starting mix is just great because it's a nice, super light, fluffy mix. It gives the seed a nice head start. But again, any of these things will germinate in our regular potting soil as well. So if you're going to keep it in this situation, and we're going to keep it, like we're going to grow these plants in this situation, and we're going to sell these plants in these 4-packs, I would use this. This is more like a long-term, you're not going to move them from this spot. If you're planning on transplanting stuff, I usually start them in this. And then we transplant them up into either a pot like this or a little bigger pot even at this point. It's nice to have different cells to put off different plants in. You don't have to fill up every last one of them, but you can start different plants. This one has, I think, there are 15 holes in it, 15 different things you can start here. Or you can just put the same seeds in a couple different ones as well. Again, not all of them germinate. They don't all germinate at the same time. You're going to get a pack of 20 or 30 tomato seeds in a packet. I don't know, you guys got a place to put 20 or 30 tomato plants? I don't. I have a place for like 3 or 4. So what I usually do is I'll put in like maybe 6 or 7 seeds in here, see which ones germinate, which ones do the best. You got to be a little ruthless. The ones that are weak, you got to throw away the weak, you got to keep the strong. And those are the ones you transplant up into a little bigger pot, and you go from there. So this gives you a little more options as to how you're going to do it.
Dig them out of there or something?
Yeah, we'll show you in a second. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I'm starting seeds, so like say we're starting seeds in this situation, so I get it nice and full of soil like this. I would wet the soil first, just to make sure the soil is moist. Let's see if I got some water here. Because usually what you're going to do, you want to wet it first, because if you wet it after, a lot of times the seeds are going to splash out or move around the way you don't want them to. So if you wet it first, they'll be nice and wet. You can use other things too. We can use like these different types of peat pots and peat pellets. These kind of things you can start them in as well. These are things you can just easily transplant outdoors. But once you get to this point, you either get your pot filled or your tray filled or something like this. All we're going to do now is we're just going to pop some seeds out and pop them into the soil. They're going to tell you, each packet here tells you like a seed depth. Generally the answer is this. The smaller the seed, the more towards the surface it goes. The bigger the seed, the farther down it goes. So if you have a larger seed, like these are moonflowers, they're pretty big seeds, I can show you. They're almost like, these are a little special too, because moonflower seeds are something that are really hard. And sometimes you do something called Scarify them. And you can either do it a couple ways. You can either rub some sandpaper on them to get some of the hard outer coating off. Or in this case, all you can do is soak them in water for a couple days, or overnight at least. That gets the outer hard shell to crack and gets the seed to germinate at that point. It's only for certain seeds. It'll tell you on the back here if that's the case. But most seeds you don't have to do that to. So in this situation, I would just go through and I would just pop some seeds here in the top of each one, like this. So I'm going to put 2 in each one, just in case one doesn't germinate. And then I just go over and just pop a little extra soil over the top to get it to about the right depth. So these are maybe an eighth of an inch. You got to get them deep. You don't have to bust out your tape measure. The seed doesn't know exactly how deep it is. It's okay. So again, your soil was moistened first, so you're going to add a little layer on top. So what I always do is I just come back and use like a little spray bottle like this and give a little spritz over the top. So this is just regular water. You're just going to spray over the top. This does a couple things. Obviously it gets the top layer of soil moist. There's sometimes where you have seeds that'll tell you on the packet that they need light to germinate. So if they say they need light to germinate, you're just going to put them right on top of the soil. You're not going to add that little extra on top. So because it's going to need that extra light to get the plant going in the first place. So then in that case, you would just put the seed on top and just spritz it. The spritzing of the soil obviously moistens the soil. It also pushes the seed down against the soil itself, so you get good seed-soil contact. You want to have some good seed-soil contact for that seed to germinate. What seeds need to germinate, they can sit in this packet forever. They're looking for the right, the right temperature and the right amount of moisture, and that's what activates these seeds. So once we get them in that situation, we got our seeds started. And we want to make sure, yes, there's extra drainage as well. So at both these things, again, we're going to have a tray with no holes in them because I don't have a greenhouse in my house either. So what I do is if there's excess water, when I'm done, I just make sure I kind of just tip out the excess water out the side. Make sure it's not sitting in water. You don't want it to actually be sitting in water. You want that to have a little bit of extra drainage. Pardon me. All right, so we talked about soil. And then we're going to talk about soil temperature. I skipped over real quick. So what seeds really need, they're not really looking for the air temperature as much as the soil temperature. So one thing we can do to help that out just a little bit, these seeds will germinate with or without this, but this just helps. So we have a Seedling Heat Map. So what this does is it's about the same size as this tray, and it has just something you plug in. And what this does is it raises the temperature about 10, 12 degrees above whatever the temperature of your table is. So it makes it a little bit warmer. So it warms it from underneath and gives the seeds a good warm soil to get them to germinate quicker. So this gives you a little bit of a head start if you want to do that. You don't have to do that, but again, it just helps. It's just something that can help out your seeds. So when we talked about germination and plant depth, We did the sowing of the seeds already.
So how often, so say that you get out there or you're in your garage or whatever, how often are you watering that and how long would it take to?
Right. So what you're doing now is, so once this is full and you got your seeds planted, so this is why I have this here. So at this point, say whatever your container is, and this is all your soil in here. This is the top of the soil. Okay. So your seeds are like up in here. This is where all the action is. All the action's up here. There's nothing going on down here. This is just soil. This is just moist soil down here. So at this point, you want to keep this top layer moist. So you can do that a couple ways. You can either go by every day and check it and just make sure that's moist. You can come by and spritz it. Give it a little spritz. Make sure that top layer stays moist while they're germinating. Or you can use one of these guys. You can use like one of these little domes. We have this. So you can put this over the top. That way you can keeps in the humidity moisture a lot better. So either way works. Yeah.
Start it outside.
Yeah.
On your porch. Should you put the lid on for
No, yeah, outside the sun's pretty intense. They're going to kind of cook in there. You don't want to get it too hot, but yeah. Just trying to keep that top layer moist at that point. So that's all we're trying to do.
When do you take the heat mat away from the seedlings?
Once they germinate, yeah. So we're going to talk about it in just a second here. So yeah. So yeah, temperature, a good temperature is like 85 degrees to germinate. It'll germinate at lower temperatures too, but that's an ideal. So that's why the heat mat helps with germination. Some of the cool season crops don't need to be that warm anyway. They'll germinate at lower temperatures. So, and then I'm going to flip over to light because we're going to talk about, this is the setup I have at home. You don't have to do what I do, but this is what I have going on at home. It's this. We're going to talk about light. Light is probably the most important thing about when growing seedlings because they need to have extra light. Whatever light you have coming in a window and such is fine, but what happens all the time is plants tend to stretch. They'll stretch, always looking for some extra light. And so if we can throw extra light on them, there'll be less stretching involved, and the plant will be sturdier in the long run. So see what happens, like, even with these beans, they're obviously already stretching pretty high. And these are some kale plants I started a couple weeks ago as well. So they're kind of stretchy. They're long and stretchy and lanky like this. So we're going to try to avoid this as much as possible. So what can we do? We can add some extra light to it. For just the purpose of starting seeds, you don't need a fancy light. There are these, there's grow lights that have all different spectrum of colors and all that you can get. There's some fluorescent ones as well. Basically, you can group it into like cool light and warm lights. So cool light is your basic fluorescent tubes. That's cool light. That promotes green growth. So when we're starting seeds, that's all we're worried about. We're worried about getting a nice jump start to your plants, a little green growth. If you're going to grow a plant inside, if you're growing something that you want the fruit and flower inside, that's when you're going to use a full spectrum because that promotes flowering, fruiting. That's the warm light, and spectrum helps promote that. So if you're just doing seeds, something simple as a fluorescent light is fine. You don't need to go. So I just use these, regular fluorescent light. Get a shop light at Menards. I don't know, like $20, $25, something like this. So I have a setup in my basement where I have a table, a little smaller than this maybe. And I have two of these hanging off the ceiling, the unfinished part of my basement. So I'm plugged in over here. And I have two of them hanging. So I have one over here and one over here. That gives you a space for 4 of these trays underneath it. So 2 on this side, 2 on this side. I also have 2 hanging underneath the table on either side. So I have 2 on the bottom and 2 on the other side. So I have a space for 8 trays is what I have with 4 shop lights.
So you talked about fluorescent bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
What about LEDs?
Yes, there's lots of LED bulbs out there too. I'm not a light scientist, so I don't have all the information, but I know there's things like lumens and all that. But really, what you're worried about is the bigger the wattage, the more light you're going to put out. That's fine, but what you really want to do is get the plants as close as possible to the light source, which is why these are great because these are on chains, and the chains allow you to lower and raise this thing as the plant grows. So, like if you're starting seeds and I usually have this on top of it like this. I'll have this light literally right here, like hanging right on top of it. The farther away you go with your light source, the less light that plant's going to get. So it's going to get stretched as your light grow as you raise your light source. So we're talking about foot candles. So the closer it is, you can just use a regular 40-watt bulb, and you can get pretty darn close. And if you have a higher wattage one, you can go a little higher. But usually you want to get it right on top of it like that. So then as the plant grows, then you can always just raise this up a little bit just to keep it a little bit higher than the plant itself.
24/7?
I have them on a timer for like the longest day, which is daylight length, which is around like, 16 hours? So I have them on a timer. So they kick on at whatever, 5 or 6 in the morning, and whatever that is, at maybe 7 or 8 at night or something like that, they'll turn off. So they don't have to be 24/7. There's really no benefit to that. So saves you a little money. So in this case, what I do is I have my Seedling Heat Map over here. So that's step 1. So I'm going to germinate my seeds on the Seedling Heat Map. As soon as they start germinating, get them off the heat map. Don't need to be over here anymore. So then I move over to one of these other locations. So things germinate differently at different times, sometimes too. So if I'm starting them in a thing like this, maybe like whatever's in this couple cells over here is starting to germinate and these aren't. So that's why this is nice. You can kind of take these and break them apart and pop this thing out and move it over so it's out of the situation. So I use almost have like a germination station over here, like where my heat mat is. So that's where I germinate plants, and then as they germinate, I move them off to the other locations. So you want to have like a place to germinate, place to grow. You want to have a couple places. Be the best thing to do.
So they don't necessarily need the light while they're germinating?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Oh, they do. Okay.
They do.
So
Well,
the heat mat and the light.
for the most part, there are certain seeds that need light to germinate.
Right.
They're on the top of the soil. You're correct. If they're all underneath the soil, it's dark under the soil. You're right. They don't need the light to
So
germinate
just the
per
heat
se.
mat to germinate, and
Yeah.
then you move them to the lighted situation.
Right. Yeah. But as they germinate, you want to have that light source
Right.
there pretty quick, because if they're gonna start stretching if you don't. So that's why you put it there right away. So again,
So
yeah.
if a plant is at that stage right here,
Yeah.
how far above the plant, not Louisiana, but how far above the plant will a light source be?
Oh, again, as close as possible. Yeah, like a couple inches actually. Yeah, I try to go as close as possible. So it's just not like touching it like this. You want it to be just up, probably like somewhere around here, kind of thing. So I have them on chain, so I just want to keep them as close as possible. Whatever extra light, more light the better. You can throw on them. So I even actually throw I have like a wall of behind it where I put some, I stapled some aluminum foil on it, so it actually reflects the light back. So whatever light you can throw on it, it helps.
So the heat, is that underneath the tree?
Yep, it's going to be underneath this one.
But
So
you said not,
Yeah, so this goes underneath. This is like
it's not.
it's a flat plastic heat map.
But it's
It's your-
not, is it
your flip
inside
map.
the tray? Or
Nope,
on
you're just going to put it on top.
Okay.
So all this does is it makes it like 10 to 15 degrees warmer than this table surface. And so it'll just warm it up from underneath like that. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You had said that those, the kale and the beans are leggy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you do to stop that? I mean, are you pinching them or?
No, you can do a couple things. We'll get there in just a second.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just a second, yeah. It's okay. It's okay. I know you guys are going to jump ahead. I understand. So the reason we like to move things off from germination to a different spot is because, okay, so here we started our seeds. All the action's up here, right? So now, as your seedling starts to grow, and your seedling's going to grow this way, and the roots are going to come down this way. So now you want to have more of the moisture and stuff down here, because you want to have the roots go down and seek the moisture that's on the bottom of your container. So at this point, we want to have this soil surface, after they germinate, this soil surface you want to keep drier. So we're doing the opposite now. You want to take that dome off, no more spritzing. So we're going to move, that's why we're moving it from the germination spot to our growing spot. Because what can happen is things like this, damping off. If you keep this dome on here and you keep it super humid after they germinate, you're going to end up with damping off, which is like a fungal problem that happens right at the soil surface that will actually rot your seedling, and they'll flop over, or sometimes you'll even have some like fuzzy mold growth up here on top of the soil, that kind of thing. So you don't want that. So after the seed germinates, you're going to do the opposite. So
That's white growth.
yeah. So before germination, keep soil surface moist. After germination, keep it drier. And you want to have water. You want to have the moisture down here. So what I do on my, where I keep the germination part, I would just keep this and I keep it moist and everything. And when I move it over to my growing spot, I end up watering them from underneath. How do you do that? I'll just take this tray and I'll just pick up a corner like this. And I'll actually pour the water in on the side. So kind of pour it in like this, from underneath, and let it fill up. And what that does, it'll soak up the water from underneath and keep the soil surface drier. So what I do is I pour some water in there, and I check it like maybe 10, 15 minutes later. If there's still water standing in the bottom, then I go and just pour out the excess. Just go over the sink and just pour out the excess that's sitting on the bottom. That way that the bottom layer of soil is moist now, top layer is dry, and that's what you want. You want to avoid the whole situation of damping off that way. It's an easy way to kill a lot of your plants.
That's the way to determine if the soil is dry under there.
We usually go by the weight. So you just kind of pick it up and see where you're at for weight, or just pick up the little corner like this and see where you're at, and see how much it weighs. That's how we do. That's how we water all our plants here. Actually, we go by the weight more than by looking at the top of the soil. Putting your finger in the soil doesn't tell you anything really. You gotta pick it up and see how much it weighs. So another little tip that you can do as well, that I do sometimes too. You can throw a fan on. So I just have like a little tiny fan over the side, off the side of the table. Low setting, doesn't have to be high, just low setting. Just so it's blowing over the top of your plants. It does two things. It helps to keep that top layer of the soil dry, so you're avoiding this damping off problem. And it also does this. So your plants are growing. They're growing in an environment, I assume there's no wind in your house. So when we go to transplant your plant outside, your plants aren't usually rigid, they're very floppy. So if you throw a fan on them while they're inside, it forces the plant to have more, it's called turgidity. It gives it more of a rigid cell structure. So when you go to plant your plant outside, you have a nice sturdy plant as opposed to a floppy plant. So that's one of the little tips you can do to put just some air on your seedlings. So when it comes to transplanting indoors, so what we usually do is this. So this one's not quite ready, but it's getting there. So these first plants, these first things that come up here, these aren't really leaves. These are called Cotyledons. So when the seedling has all the energy inside it to grow, it pushes these things up. These are the first things that pop. So this is what we'll say little energy sacs for the plant. So they're going to put these out. They're going to collect some light from the light source or from the sun, and they're going to transfer that energy down to the plant with photosynthesis. And you can see, it's hard to see. I know you guys are far away, but you can barely see the real true leaves are just starting to pop on these guys. The true leaves look totally different than the cotyledons a lot of times. So at this point, when the plant gets to this point where they're just starting to sprout their own true leaves, this is a good time to transplant them. So if I started like some plants in this situation like this, these are kale plants. I know I like kale. Maybe people do what I do. This is when I would transplant fairly soon into a larger container. Okay, do I need 40 kale plants? No, I don't need that many. So what I'm going to do is pick and choose the best ones out of here, transplant to the other situation.
How do you break those lips apart?
Yeah, you're going to go like this. So I forgot the part where when you do your seedlings, you always want to mark your seedlings when you plant them, because guess what? All tomato plants look exactly the same before you put them out. So you got to make sure if you're going to do that, you're going to mark what variety you have and what thing. You can also use this as your transplanting tool. That's what I do. So you're just going to kind of dig right off to the side of the thing, and you're going to push up from underneath, and just kind of pull at the same time. I know it's a little hard to see, but you're going to pull gently so you have this come out. So you have your little seedling here. So you have a little tiny seedling, everything's going up here, and you got one little root going down, and you got a little bit of fuzzy roots on the bottom here. So where these cotyledons start, see here, all this right here, oh, sorry, all this can be planted below the soil surface.
You shouldn't spit your hands.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, all this from the cotyledon where that starts, where it meets the stem, from down to here, all this can be planted below the soil surface. So when you're transplanting, you can always transplant deeper. You can transplant where the soil level is to where that cotyledon meets. So even if you have some stretching of your plant initially, when you do this transplant, you can correct that. So what I do is I'll make a little hole here in this, and I'll push it all the way down so that is down at the same soil surface level like that. So you just barely have your new leaf sticking out the top. That gives you, again, a lot more turgidity. The plant will grow from this point. So if you transplant it and it's still like way up here, it's still going to be floppy. It's still going to want to flop around and stuff. Yes.
So now would you transplant it out of soil instead of starters?
Yes. When you transplant up from a seed starting mix, then you go to a potting soil. It's just a thicker mix, a heavier mix that will hold water and nutrients a little bit better than that seed starting mix. Doesn't really matter. I mean, they're both good, but it's just a little better to use a regular potting soil at this point. Another thing you could do is this. So if you started your plants like we start our plants in these trays, so what'll happen is, yeah, even in a greenhouse, they'll grow up like this, and they'll be kind of growing up above the soil line like this. So what we do is you can go back and literally just take your finger and just go ahead and push it down. So we have girls that go around, and we just go around and push down all our plants. So yeah, even in a greenhouse that we have here, we have them. This is what we do. We push it down to where it's, and so then you start off with a nice sturdier plant that way. So that's how you get around this whole stretching problem that happens a lot of times. Flowers are vegetables, yes. It works for both. It doesn't matter, yeah. Because all flowers will do the same kind of thing too. Some people ask about fertilizing. You know, each seed has everything it needs to start growing inside it. It doesn't really need a lot of fertilizer because all that energy is already in there. When you transplant stuff, anytime you transplant anything, from this indoors or from indoors to the ground, anytime, I always use something like this. This is a plant starter. This is like a plant hormone that gets the plant to overcome the transplant shock. Anytime you rip a plant out of soil and put it somewhere else, you're ripping off a lot of the fine root hairs on the plant. Shocks it. You know, it's not super happy about that. So it gets this, helps it overcome the transplant shock. It does have a little bit of fertilizer in it. It has like a 3-10-3 that phosphorus in the middle that helps encourage root growth. Sorry, and to get it a good start for it.
What's that called?
Plant starter. Yeah, so it's a good one to. Anytime you transplant anything, trees, shrubs, whatever, anything, this helps overcome transplant shock.
So do you water with this?
Yes, this is just a liquid you're just going to mix with your, so that when you go to transplant, you always want to water it right after you transplant it. Just water it with this in it, so that'll help. All right. Yeah, and once you get it transplanted outdoors, you know, for the rest of the season, that's when you can start using your regular fertilizers and such at that point.
So do you always like you grow your seed and then you transplant it indoors and then you transplant it outside? So you're doing it twice?
You're doing it twice. I do it twice for a lot of things. But again, if you don't want to, you can transplant it inside and you do that little push technique.
Yeah.
Push it down. So.
Okay.
Be ruthless. I know everybody's like, oh, I don't want to throw away my 40 seedlings. What can I do with all these seedlings? You only have so much space in your house. I only have so much space in my house. I don't think you have a bigger house as I do, but I only have so much space to grow these things. So you have to pick and choose which ones you want to transplant. You're going to have to whittle out the weak. Take the strongest ones, whittle out the weak ones. Be ruthless. It's okay. What are you going to do with 40 kale plants? I don't know what to do with all that. So do the best you can. Yes.
What if you start your plants in those pea pods?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you're still gonna pull them out and transplant them then?
You can start them in these peat pots like this if you want. Yeah. Depends what it is. You know, sometimes you're going to just do one plant per pot. If it's certain things, you can do a couple plants per pot.
What about like the pods? Maybe I'm calling them wrong.
Oh, these little pellet things. Yeah, I got some of these here too. Yeah. Both of these are just compressed peat.
Yeah.
So this is you could do one seed. I would do like 2 seeds in here just in case one doesn't germinate, and just pick out the weak one. You know, it's like a bird's nest. You know, they kick out the weak one. You know, it's the same thing. You just want to keep the best one in here. This is something you're going to soak in soil, and this just turns into like a little ball of peat. And you would start your seed basically it's the same as that. You'd start your seed on the top, and it would just kind of grow into this little peat pellet, and then you could just. And the same with this thing. You can just plant the whole thing in the ground because it's just both of these just biodegrade.
But so when you transplant it, you're still just leaving it in
Yeah, this one. That's why I don't use this because you don't have the advantages of being able to push things down in here like this and all that.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's not quite the same. So, but you can use these things. But that's why I prefer to use trays like this instead.
I've never had those peat pots. Dissolved, I mean,
Right. Sometimes they don't. Yeah, I mean they're really hard. They're really compressed really hard. So they break down, but it takes a long time for them to break down. So it really.
Cut back on the bottom of it, or
You can cut the bottom off. You can cut the top off just so it doesn't wick away moisture too. But yeah, that's why you can use these, but I don't super recommend these kind of things. We can use these. We can get you pots like this too. We have our plastic pots like this if you want to transplant up to something like this size as well. We can do that. It's usually a little better. So now I know I'm going kind of quick, but I'm just going to go through this. So, but we got everything transplanted inside. Now we're going to kind of transition outdoors. Okay. So what we do, eventually get warm around here. So you got to transfer your plants outdoors first. What's not in your house? There's no wind in your house. There's no vast temperature changes in your house. Your house maybe goes up 5 or 10 degrees, maybe max, up and down. Outside it can be 70 degrees during the day. It could be 35 at night. At least your plants aren't used to that. So again, putting a fan on them helps with the wind problem. So it gives them a little more turgidity. And what you want to do to transfer them outdoors is give them just a little bit on certain nice days. Get them outside in a little shadier spot first, so they're not in the direct sun right away. If you put something out in the direct sun that hasn't been out in the direct sun, it'll get scorched. You don't want that to happen first. So out in a little shady spot, maybe most of the day on a nice day, bring it back in at night. It's not used to being cold yet. Do that for a couple times. You can also use something like if you have like a cold frame outside, it's something you can build that has either a piece of glass or plastic over the top, or like one of those little mini greenhouses. I've seen these at Menards, or Farm and Fleet has them. You can put them out in a little mini greenhouse outside as well. Just make sure it doesn't get too hot in there, because if you're out in the blazing sun, it'll get pretty hot in there pretty fast. So, but that's another way to transition them kind of outdoors. Get them used to being outside a little bit, and you can pop in that little greenhouse overnight kind of thing. Come back out again. You have to bring them in and out completely that way. So you just gotta make sure they don't get shocked from going straight from being indoors to being outdoors. Give them a little bit of a transition. That's what you're trying to do. And then just planting them outdoors. At that point, you'll just make sure again. There's a few plants, like you're doing cool season vegetables or cool season flowers that can go out a little bit earlier. There's some things that can handle light frosts. That's gonna be like end of April, kind of into early May. You can plant those kind of things. But for most of these things, most of the plants we grow here, and the flowers, and most of the tropical type vegetables we grow, you want to wait until after that point, for that May 15th or May 20th point, to actually get your plants outside. If you're going to plant things in containers outside, you can do a little bit earlier. Sometimes you only want to plant some. I know people that do like some lettuce bowls or some stuff like that, or plant their tomatoes and peppers in containers and leave them in that pot all summer. You can get away with going out a little bit sooner on nice days and then bring them in on cold nights, that kind of thing. So it's advantages of growing some things in containers outside. You can move them around a little bit if you want to do that too. If you're going to use any type of frost protection, just make sure it's like a sheet, nothing plastic. You don't want any plastic on there because it'll conduct cold things. So, but yeah, so it's a process. It's not something that's a lot of people nowadays want instant gardens. This is not that. So this is going to be a process. This takes time. You know, it takes like a week or two for these things to germinate, to grow, and do their thing. So again, realize what certain times, you know, certain plants that don't need to be planted outside. Okay, like these beans, obviously do not need to be planted indoors. You can wait, just wait until the soil warms up. Get them outside, just plant them directly outside. You avoid this whole transplanting, the whole transplant shock. The plant gets to grow where it wants to grow in the first place. Same thing with this. This is just some spinach I started. So this doesn't look like spinach at all. These are like those first cotyledons that come out, which looks nothing like spinach. But again, it's something you can plant en masse outdoors a little easier. You don't have to do this, but you can give it a little bit of a head start like this, but you don't have to do these kind of things. So just you realize what you're growing, why you're growing it, and such. Yeah.
So in watermelon seeds,
Yeah.
they always say put them on that hill, and what do they mean by that?
That hill is just because it's a vining plant. It can vine off in different directions. So you can put a couple seeds in a hill, and so you'll have a couple plants that germinate, and they'll just kind of find their way. One's going to go this way, one's going to search for light over this way, one's going to go this way, kind of thing. So it's if you're a large enough area to let that happen. So
You make the mound.
yeah, you're just maybe covering it with soil just to keep that moisture. So they're really the only you can germinate any seed on top of the soil like this if you want to. The only reason you bury them in the soil is just it gives it that consistent moisture because you don't have there'll be moisture wrapping all the way around, so on top and underneath, it'll keep it moist for a long enough period of time to germinate and do its thing. So that's all we're really looking for
They
there.
grow in seed, like in these greenhouses, but when I've done direct selling for like green beans, the birds go after the seed. So how-
Right. Yeah. There's your enemies out in the world. There's enemies like birds and chipmunks and those kind of things. I know, squirrels. They like to dig up your seeds. Yeah.
Just wondering what you think.
You can throw things. You can dip some cayenne pepper and stuff like that over the top of them, or dip the seeds in them, that kind of thing. They don't really like that.
Okay, well, just one thing I tried and seems to help is the string that I use for when I tie it to a stick. You know, when I set it to a string row or green beans, I just leave it right on the ground level to keep them away. And then once they start sprouting, I raise the string a little.
Okay.
I kind of follow it until they're big and the animals don't care anymore.
Good idea.
Just a
Okay.
suggestion.
Excellent. Yeah.
You know,
Very good idea.
they seem to help. I just kind of stumble on it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I know this is a quick overview, and I know you guys may have some extra questions. What do you guys have anything? Yes.
Can you transplant indoors? You talk about fertilizing.
You can fertilize weekly with a basic fertilizer, but again, I myself don't do a whole lot of that fertilizing per se. I usually wait a little bit on that to get them outside. Fertilizing is, you can help with all different types of growth, the root growth, the top growth, and all that. All I'm trying to do is get these plants off to a decent start, and once they get off to a decent start, I get them out to where they're going, and then I add a little bit more fertilizer at that point. But you certainly can, but you don't have to. Per se.
Last year I planted, I started zinnias from indoors, and everything went fine. And the seed packet, does it also tell you how long, not just germinate, but how long it's going to be till they flower? Because it seemed like there was a long, I know outdoor success,
Right.
they were growing, but it just took a long time to get.
Right. Yeah. It takes a long time for some sort of things to flower. They'll give you an idea on there. Sometimes they'll say like 80 days or something like that to flowering. That's not exact science. I mean, that's just going to be. It depends on the temperature, the conditions that we put them in, and all that. And anytime we transplant anything or transition them from indoors to outdoors, they go through like that little shock period that kind of shuts them down a little bit, and then they kind of grow from there. So it's hard for those plants to. We do the best we can, and our growing season here is short, so we do the best we can to try to give them a little jump start.
And do snapdragons just take that much longer?
Yes. Yeah. Some things just take a little bit longer,
I
just
didn't
to
pay attention to
just
that.
to flower and stuff. Yeah. So it's. And you'll learn when you do things from year to year. You just kind of learn. Sometimes these seed packets aren't always exactly right. Sometimes maybe you think, okay, maybe my snapdragons took forever to bloom last year. I'm going to start them a little earlier than I did the year before, so then I know. You learn as you go. You learn as you do different things different ways. So
If I go shopping in May to go buy my zinnias for my pots,
right.
now they're already flowered. I'm
Right.
buying a pot that has a flower on it already. Like,
Right.
when did you start that?
Right. Yeah. Those get started a lot earlier, a lot sooner. Yeah. that's now we're talking about the instant garden gratification thing. So everybody wants everything to be blooming right away, right when they plant them outside. If you want that, then you have to start things even sooner.
Okay.
Your home isn't usually conducive to having plants in them as long as, you know, the shorter time we can do this in, the shortest time is the best. You know, the longer they're inside, the longer they're exposed to not sunlight, not wind, you know, not different situations. It's not quite as good. So when we start things in the greenhouse, we can do things. We can open up the sides. We can we can get them transitioned to outdoors a little quicker. We give them a little extra boost of different fertilizer and stuff to get them to flower, because people don't usually like to buy flowers without flowers on them. So that's why we have things blooming right away. But see, in the real world, your flowers aren't supposed to flower until later on in the season. So, I mean, that's one of those things you can adjust. Again, from year to year, you're going to find out when you start something this year, next year maybe you'll start a little sooner if you want the flowers sooner. That's all you got to do.
So at home you can't start it early enough to where it will flower. You need this kind of thing.
You need kind of this. Well, then we're talking about something different. So then you need to start more with, instead of just regular lights or regular fluorescent light, then you want to go with those full spectrum grow lights.
Okay.
Because that's going to add the warm part of the light. See, the sun is full spectrum. The sun has everything. The sun has warm, cool light, everything, all the full spectrum to it. So you want to add that extra light to it to get the flowering process going quicker. Because you don't have that. So all I'm trying, what I usually do, and I try to do, is I try to just grow a nice plant, and that plant is good enough and sturdy enough to go outside, and then it can do its thing when it gets out there. So if you want things to flower sooner, you got to do a little bit different things to it. Yeah.
If I've harvested seeds from last season and I didn't do the cold period, then they just won't sprout.
What is what we're talking about?
Tomatoes.
No,
and beans.
perennials are fine. Yeah. It's certain perennials that are native to our area. What happens in nature? Okay, say on a coneflower, if the flower flowers, matures, seeds mature on the plant, and if no birds come to eat them, the seeds will drop. We'll be outside all winter to get that cold period, and then they'll need that, and then they'll germinate the next spring.
Okay, so if I took some sweet pea, I think they were as a sweet pea, and it was like a purple pod from a walk that I found. So those would need a cold period.
If it's a perennial sweet pea, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Some do and some don't. Some perennials can grow first year from seed, that kind of thing. It's just different. It's just mostly a lot of native perennials and stuff like that. You need that.
Okay.
Yeah, so. When you do seeds, like we're saying, like seeds for next year, if you want to keep seeds from year to year, if it's a vegetable or a flower, you need to have the seed mature and ripen on the plant. You can't pick it too soon. Like if you're going to pick your prized tomato plant and you want to keep your tomato seeds for next year, you want to have that tomato stay on that plant, become almost overripe. You want it to get to the point where it's dark red. It's almost starting to just be overripe and rotting, and then you're going to pick those seeds out of there. Same thing with flowers. You want to make the flower. You want to make sure the flower gets completely to the point where it's turning brown, so you know that seed is matured on the plant, and then you know that seed is going to be viable for next year. If you pick it too soon, the seed hasn't matured, and that's not going to germinate next year.
I have a question. So I have neighbors that I let go and I take out the dead weeds and stuff, but then after the flowers are there, toward the end, they have those pods that have like seeds inside. So when do you know to use those? Do you just wait until before the pot opens up?
You can let nature do its thing, and nature will tell you when they're ripe, and they'll turn completely brown, and the outer husk of that will start to crack. That's when you know that seed pod is ripened.
If it's cracked.
Yeah, you're going to see it has to completely mature on there.
Like I touch it, like you hear it's almost like a rattle.
Yeah. So it just has to completely ripen on the plant itself, and then you know it's viable. Is it worth it? Daylilies take forever to grow from seed. It's going to take a while. Yeah, but sure, you can. It doesn't hurt,
I'm just
but
curious because I'm like, actually work.
Yeah. You just have to think what nature does. Nature is smarter than we are. Nature does what it does. We were trying to trick nature with all these little tricks we're doing here. So, but nature does, what it's going to do.
Talking about?
She's talking about daylilies. Daylilies form like a seed pod after they flower, kind of thing. So,
Can I ask you about fertilizing? You're trying to do your garden more organic, like lettuce. What would you use?
Oh, just like in general outside kind of thing? Yeah, we sell a few different types of organic fertilizers that we have. Most everything that's organic will come in like a granular form. We're just going to mix into the soil. I always liken it to this when we talk about fertilizer in general. It's like you eating, like if you took like a handful of refined sugar and just ate it, you get like really big, really fast sugar high off of it, but it also goes away very quickly. That's what happens when you use like a water-based fertilizer, like a Miracle Grow or something like that. It gives it a quick shot of fertilizer really hard, and then it goes away quickly. If you use an organic fertilizer, they're always going to be like a granular-based. They're a couple steps away from what the plant actually needs. So it has to break down a couple steps for that plant to actually use it. Whereas like a Miracle Grow, it's there. It's ready for the plant to use. It uses it, goes away fast. Organic fertilizers we sell have to break down slowly over time. So you don't have to look for big numbers. When you see Miracle Grow when it says like 30, 30, 30, that's big numbers, but it also goes away very fast. So if you see an organic fertilizer that says like 575, you're like, oh, that's nothing. Well, that's not going to work. That's not going to do anything. But it does, because it does it slowly over time, and it breaks down easier and better for you. So it's like you eating like natural sugars. It's like you eating like fresh fruit or something like that. It's sugar, but it's not refined sugar. It takes a couple steps inside your body to break down and for you to get the nutrients. So it's the same thing with plants. So.
Do you carry the product for seed corn maggot?
For who?
Seed corn maggots?
Seed corn maggots. No, I'm not aware of those guys. What are they?
My beans.
Okay.
They have beans, I plant beans.
Mm-hmm.
Some will come up nice, some nice leaf on, some probably no leaf on, and if you switch, there'll be nothing at all. You have to find the beans thing again, find it.
Okay. So these are guys in the soil that eat your stuff. Okay.
It's a maggot.
Okay. Well, it wouldn't be organic, but we do have some products we could use for something like that. We do have like a granular type of insecticide that might work for something like that. If you have to add to the soil when you're planting the seed, you do it at the same time, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Nature's cruel. Nature. I don't know how people lived 400 years ago when you had to like grow your own crops. Right, yeah. Because like your crop fails, you don't eat. I'm like, well, how did you people live back then?
Yeah.
I don't understand. But we're lucky to live in the world we live in. So yeah. If you have a greenhouse, maybe not quite this big, but if you have a greenhouse, it's a different situation. If you can have it outdoors, which you do, okay, you first have to figure out the temperature thing. Are you going to heat this thing? Okay, if you're going to keep it heated to a certain temperature, then yes. You can use the sun then. You can use sunlight because it's full spectrum, it's intense, it's there. You can add extra light if you wanted to. It depends on what you're starting and when you're starting it. The earlier you start it, like if you're starting some stuff like now in February and early March, you might want to add some extra light to it. Because every day, the sun now, as we get to mid-March, the sun gets a little higher in the sky, it gets more and more intense all the time. That intensity translates to you don't need to add extra light outside the greenhouse. So that's why we can start seeds out here now, because that sun keeps going up and up every day. We don't have to add a lot of that extra light. Right. It doesn't really need that exact time to germinate, to do its thing. Yeah. Any other?
Well, it makes an annual act like a preannual. They will drop seeds and replant the next year.
Some annuals just naturally will do that. That if you let nature be, you don't cut off the flowers, nature will produce seeds and such. A lot of the problem is that sometimes we grow plants as annuals that are tropical plants, and the tropical plants, the seeds can't handle the freezing temperatures of our winter. So you have to collect the seed.
Gardens along the side of my house, like 60 feet, 20 feet long.
Yeah.
And the cherry tomatoes, whatever the other tomatoes just dropped to the ground.
Sure.
And I decided last summer I wasn't going to plant anything, and it was supposed to be just that. Well, I think I had like 100 tomato plants growing from tomatoes.
You could, yeah. You could, yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I just didn't even maintain them.
Right.
But bread, and they have the best tomatoes.
Nature works with or without you sometimes. So
And I never anticipated anything like that could happen. I thought, the tomatoes all over
you
the
can get some. Yeah, if you're lucky enough to have a situation where your tomato seed drop. See, again, you're avoiding the whole transplant shock and everything. The seed germinates where it's going to be. It grows. Our growing season isn't quite long enough. We try to get tomatoes sooner. Maybe your tomatoes didn't ripen until a little bit later in that situation. So this is why we do this, to get your tomatoes to ripen a little sooner, because our growing season isn't long enough where we live here. So.
Is there a way to prevent blossom end rot on tomatoes?
Well, that's a different problem, but yes, you can add. It's a calcium deficiency when the flower first forms on tomatoes. So that's just something we need. A lot of times that happens when the plant is young. It doesn't have the big enough root system to absorb all the calcium. We live on limestone-based soil. I live in a gravel pit, I think. Every time I dig, there's gravel. So there's all kinds of calcium in the soil already. It has to be available to the plant at the right time. We just sell like a spray that you can add some extra calcium to the plant if you want to.
Ready to shop. There you go.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Carefully. Very carefully is the answer. So again, you have something that's fairly floppy up, like sticking up in the air. You're just kind of go just to the side of it, just a little bit, and push down so it gets down below the soil surface. And it's hard to show you from way up here, but just carefully, and just try to do it. So you can bend it a little bit. It's fine. These are flexible. They're pliable. You're just trying to get it down so it's.
If it's in good high, you don't have to worry so much about breaking.
No, not as much. Yeah, and sometimes do you break some? Yeah, we break some sometimes. It happens. You don't want to, but you do. So you're trying to push down more so right next to it than right on top of it.
Maybe you push it down where the seed leaves.
Just so where that cotyledon is right about the same height as the thing on top of it. Yeah. So, yes, ma'am.
If you're testing seed for viability and
Sure you can. The question was if you want to germinate and try viability on a paper towel, and they start to sprout a little bit. Can you plant those? Yes, of course you can. Yeah, you can go ahead and put those in soil and they'll go from there. So you'll know they're viable.
I have an area by my well, and I push irises and stuff all over, and I put the plants in it. Now that's where it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that can add to the soil?
Thank you.
You can always amend your soil with any type of organic matter. So we sell all different types. That's a compost, peat moss, manures, anything like that. You're going to mix it into the soil. The only thing, if there's any type of chemical or something reaction that happened around there that makes the soil sour and it won't grow anything. But other than that, any type of soil amendment helps. Anything else? Yes. Hi.
Snapdragons.
Yeah.
What would be on average the earliest that you could put? Say you started your snapdragons inside, and I know they're cool weather plants. When would be a good time to plant those?
You can transition them outdoors as early as mid-April, depending on the season we have. Some other guys said, like, our full moons usually are cold snaps, so our full moons are going to be April 15th this year, which is why Easter is April late this year, April 17th. And then the next one will be May 15th. So around that time, like third week April probably would be good. So, any other questions?
There's a couple of Facebook questions, Mike.
You do?
Yeah. So I want to know if they started zinnias and cosmos too soon, and they want to know when they can pinch them back.
Yeah. I mean, you could once you transplant stuff inside. I mean, you can give them a little pinch on top just to keep them a little shorter. If they want to do that, yeah. Otherwise, again, just if they put a fan on them or something like that, that helps a little bit just to keep them a little more rigid if they go transplant outdoors.
Oh, okay. And then she also wants to know if you can start seeds in the trough cocoa liners so that she can just transplant them outside in that when it gets warm enough out.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. It's the same as like these Jiffy Pot kind of things. You can do that too. Just be careful with these guys. Yeah, they don't always totally degrade, and they wick away moisture sometimes too. So just be careful with these guys. Just make sure they don't do that.
Basil seeds are so tiny they do not put soil on them.
Right, yeah. I mean, some of these things, if you look at it'll say these like to germinate, and they open up the packet. Sometimes it's almost like dust. I mean, they're just the tiniest things, and you just got to be super careful and just throw it on the top. And that's why I do this. You use the spray bottle and just spray it, and just spray so the moisture just will adhere to the soil surface. You get that good contact. It should germinate from that point. So
Before you ever would probably store that.
you can store it or just soak it overnight. You put a little thing, soak it overnight kind of thing. So. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
Some seed coats they don't respond to just sitting in water.
Yeah.
Are you supposed to?
Yeah, if they don't respond to soaking in water, yes, you can use like a file. Just scrape it really hard, and then put it in the water, and then they should. What will happen is if you put them in the water overnight, you'll see them like grow a little bit. They'll kind of pop. They're just going to pop that outer seed coat. They'll germinate things quicker for you. So. Anything else? All right. All right. Anybody that's registered, you're going to win this
pansy ball.
fabulous pansy bowl.